잠깐만. Don't have red light bulb. Yeah. Look. You don't get. What else you just did? Cuidado con esto. Ya está en el mismo medio. Should I turn here? Fuck, 20 and 20. So go home.
Design is subjective. Yes, absolutely. Design is using your imagination to create something to fulfill a purpose. Design is innovating objects to make life simpler for people. Something that is easy for humans to interact with. That's a key component to good design. We want something that's simple. We want something that's going to make life easier. I see one that says it's not only about looks, but also functionality. Yes, you could have a beautiful product, but if it doesn't function, what's the purpose? Do you really want to use that day to day? I see some comments in the chat. The organization of data, that absolutely takes design. You can't have a great structure if you're not thinking about how you're going to use that and how it needs to be organized. So there is design that goes into almost everything. Creation of something to fulfill a need. Yeah, for sure. A blueprint. Yes, absolutely. A process that considers users' perspectives. Yes, that's exactly what good design is. You want to make sure that you're taking your user into consideration, as I said last week and will repeat all semester. That's super important and key to good design. Enhances appearance and the functionality of a message or information, for sure. Deliberate construction of something that addresses a need or gives a certain feeling. Yeah, these are all really great. So I'm so happy that this is what your takeaway was. This is wonderful. What else? Does anyone, go ahead.
Well, clearly.
Okay, well, that's okay. What else? Does anyone have any other thoughts on this, or anything that, after looking at your classmates' responses about what design is to them, did that make you think about something differently? And it's okay if it didn't, that's fine. These are all really great answers. I'm just taking a look at the chat, nothing else. So this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And once I'm able to, I look forward to reading all of your design journals from last week. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this for now, and I saved it, so I'll be able to share that later. And let's see. Any questions before we move on with today's lecture, which is design research, understanding the problem? No? Okay. Well, as I mentioned before, we are going to talk about design research today and what that looks like. So we're going to go through the difference between qualitative and quantitative research methods and which ones we're probably going to lean towards when we're thinking about human-computer interaction. And then we'll go through what that goal-oriented design process looks like. What are those steps that you're going to go through in order to make sure that you're getting the most out of your research so that you're able to create a user-friendly, successful product? And then finally, we will go through Oh, well, we'll also go through ethnographic studies and a little bit more detail on what that is. And then finally, just some other methods that are used, but maybe not as important for our purposes this semester. So if you have any questions along the way, call them out. Feel free to stop me. I have the chat up, so I'm keeping an eye on that. Otherwise, let's get to it. So qualitative and quantitative research methods. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. So qualitative, that is going to be the process of collecting and analyzing non-numerical data. This is going to give you that rich detail that reflects how complex actual human situations are. And it sheds light on concepts and experiences and opinions. It really fills in that what, how, and why of different situations and scenarios. And then we have quantitative. So that is the opposite. This is going to be more of your hard data. So you're going to be collecting and analyzing numerical data. And this is really helpful because you can use it to find patterns and averages. But when humans are involved, as they are when you're creating a new product or a digital experience, there are limitations because you can really only find out how much or how many from that quantitative number heavy data. And there are benefits of both, but if we're looking at qualitative methods, it helps us as researchers and designers to better understand those behaviors and the attitudes, your user's ability, and what of those potential and existing users for products. You get a sense of technical, business, and environmental context in where the product is actually being used and where those users are actually interacting with it. You'll also get a better understanding of maybe vocabulary and other social aspects that the domain that your product is living in requires. And you'll understand how existing products are used. Because if you think about this, this is really a bigger story. So it's telling you the bigger picture of how these products are used, rather than this product has this many users and it was purchased this many times and whatnot. That's helpful to know, but it's not going to help you design a better, more user-friendly product. Questions so far? No? Okay. So it also helps you to fill in these really important questions. So how does this fit into the broader context of people's lives? So are they using this every single day? Are they using it at an office? Are they commuting 45 minutes and they're on their phone and they need something to keep them busy? Where are they using whatever product you're creating? What are the goals that motivate people to use a specific product? What basic tasks help people accomplish these goals? So that's important, and it's not necessarily about your product, but you'll want to understand what they need to do what are the steps that they need to perform that actually will help them achieve their goals? What experiences do people find compelling? What problems do people encounter with their current ways of doing things? And that's really important because if you're creating a product, you're going to want to, one, obviously make that user-friendly, but you want to make sure that it's solving a larger problem in someone's life, or it's making their life a little bit easier in some way. And qualitative research methods will help you fill in these blanks when you're going through that. But that doesn't mean that quantitative methods don't have a place and they're not helpful, because they absolutely are. So quantitative research will help us create market segments. So that will help us figure out, okay, who are these people? So you'll get a little bit of an idea of where in the market your product's going to fit and maybe some information about them, but it's not going to give you that human aspect. It's just going to let you know that, all right, these are your market segments. It can help you predict purchasing power. So who's actually going to purchase this? And then direct how you conduct your design research. So market modeling to forecast what your marketplace acceptance looks like. And knowing all of this will help you then go back and apply those qualitative methods so that you're going in the right direction. So these are really the facts that are going to kind of shape how you're going to go about getting that more human information from your research. It will help you select your interview targets. So what type of user do you actually want to interview when you're going through this process? If your focus of a product is for college students, you don't want to interview a bunch of 80-year-olds. That doesn't make any sense. Of course, there are some 80-year-olds that might be in college, but you want to interview who the target user is. And by looking at your quantitative research, you'll be able to narrow down who that actually is. And you'll be able to identify design problems that are in need of a solution. So a simple way that this could be looked at, if you look at website traffic and you see that your bounce rate is terrible on a certain page, that's not going to give you the whole story of why, but it's a place to start, and it will help inform, okay, something's up that's causing everyone to leave my website when they hit this page. What can I do? And then from there, you can go into different ways of trying to identify what the actual problems are. And finally, it's really helpful to create surveys with. So you can create surveys and, again, get that baseline information that will help you direct how you're going to conduct your research. So when I like to think about how I like to think about this is the quantitative methods are really like your skeleton. If you didn't have your skeleton, it would all fall apart. But once you start adding more and more on, you have that complete picture. So you need this strong backbone, but it's not complete with just numbers and just this quantitative data, because there's so much more that to tell about your users and find out about them that you can't get just from a number. Taking a look at the chat. Any questions so far? No? Okay. And then here are some examples. So here are the types of research methods, and then what maybe your raw data looks like and how that would be expressed through qualitative and quantitative. So if you're looking at interviews, you're probably taking some audio recordings, your interview notes for sure, maybe a video. So what would be qualitative about that? So your users' responses to open-ended questions. You could look at the video and the pictures. You could get an idea of body language. You can get an idea of how they're actually interacting with the product that you're interviewing them about. And you get a lot of great information about their opinions. The quantitative side of that would be, you're gonna understand how old the interviewee is, what their job is, how many years of experience do they have, and how they respond to some close-ended questions. So both are very important to know, but you can see it. You can't get a complete picture if you're just getting this baseline age, job, experience, yes, no answers. You need the meat to really get that full picture so you can make the best design decisions possible. And I'm not going to read through this whole chart, but I will post this later if you want to take a look. But these are just some great examples of what you would get out of qualitative and quantitative from each type. Any questions? No? Okay. So up next is our goal-directed design process, and that has many steps. So many different activities within this process to get that research. So you would start with your kickoff meeting, then literature review, product, prototype, competitive audits, stakeholder interviews, subject matter expert interviews, which are often called SMEs, user and customer interviews, user observations, and then ethnographic field studies. And this is a great outline of this goal-directed research process of the different components that you would want to have when going through. So what is your kickoff meeting? You start this new project, you're ready to design, and you want to just get down to it. You don't want to have to deal with this. So the kickoff meeting is really important because it allows the design team to ask the important stakeholders key questions. So what product are we actually designing? Who's going to use that? What do users need most? Who are the competitors? Why are they the competitors? What customers and users are most important to the business? So that's really important because you want to know who you're making this for. And while you want to appeal to a broad range of users, you can't make something that will please everyone. So you need to know who the most important customers and users are for your business so that you can not really cater to them, but make sure that it's meeting all of their needs, because if that's who is going to be using the product and paying for the product, you're going to want to keep them happy. And you'll also be able to ask maybe what challenges they anticipate the design team will face, and maybe even what challenges the business faces moving forward. And then we have our literature review. So that'll be collected by the design team and help that team develop questions for the subject matter experts and stakeholders. So this would include any sort of internal documents, getting an understanding of the brand, anything that they have that would be helpful to really absorb and know going forward before diving in and designing a project. Any industry reports, web searches. So it doesn't have to be anything super complete right now. This is just an initial step of getting some more information about what you're going to be creating and give you a better understanding of what's going on. So when you meet with your subject matter experts and your stakeholders, you're informed and you know what you should be asking. Audits. So this is similar to literature, where you're going to want to see product, prototype, and competitive audits. And that will allow the design team to see what's currently available on the market. So if you are creating a new product that for your company or your brand, but there are competitors already out there, you're going to want to see what is actually available and where you fit within that marketplace. And you're going to want to examine the competition. What do they do well? What do they do poorly, so that you can swoop in and make sure that your product does better than theirs. You want to be sure to review the current design if you're going through a redesign, or what the competitive product interfaces, and compare them against your interactive and visual design principles. You want to make sure that if you're going through this design process, you're going to do it right. You want to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of what's currently available, as I mentioned, and then just get a general idea of what the functional scope is. So what is available? What can it do? And is it feasible to do what you're hoping to do? Next up, you got your stakeholders. So this is anyone with authority and responsibility for the product. So you can think of it, they are commissioning this work. And it will usually include maybe some executives, managers, and you'll have some people from sales, you'll have your product managers, you'll have marketing, customer support, design, and usability, of course. And these stakeholder interviews will occur prior to the user research. And from these interviews, you will be able to understand how you're actually going to perform your research, what they're hoping to get out of this and what they need for this product. That will tell you how you are going to move forward. And then we have our subject matter experts. So these are authorities on the domain in which the product will exist in. It's really important to have these subject matter experts when you're in a complex industry. So think about a medical device or perhaps law. These are very technical and very specific, and you will need their expertise to help you out along the way, because although you are an expert at creating these products, you may not know everything about the medical world, and it's really helpful to get some input there. So these are often expert users. They are extremely knowledgeable, but they are absolutely not designers. And they likely are not going to have a clue what it takes to design something. They know how to use it, but they don't know what goes into actually creating it. It is super important to have access to them throughout the entire design process. So you're going to want to be able to tap them when you have questions, or you're working on a prototype and you need to know if a certain decision makes sense or not. So they're great. They're a great asset to have, and they're really important to have access to throughout the process. Next up, we have our customers. So customers are not necessarily the users. They are the people who are deciding to purchase it. So that could be a user. Let's say I'm the customer of an iPhone. I'm deciding to purchase that. But if you're looking at maybe a marketing software, that could be the marketing department or even IT that's deciding what software is being purchased. And then that trickles down to the users. Or if you're thinking about maybe a children's toy, the parent is the customer and the child would be the user. So their goal, when you're interviewing your customers, it's really helpful to understand what their goals are for purchasing the product. What frustrates them the most with the current solution that they're using, what their decision process for purchasing a type of product that you're designing is. So if it is an IT department, head of an IT department, what does that purchase process look like? Is it going to be decided by one person? Are they going to have to get several other departments involved? Is it going to have to go through a whole committee process? You need to understand what that looks like so that you can be prepared with materials to help sell it in, or for your sales team to help sell it in. And then you're going to want to understand what their role in installing, maintaining, and managing the product is. This will help you understand how hands-on they're going to be and how much information that they're going to need to know and what they're going to need out of this. And of course, they'll be able to let you know any issues that are kind of domain specific. So again, we'll think about medical industry or law or, I don't know, whatever. It's whatever their specialty is. You'll get an understanding of what specific issues there are for that. And finally, last but not least, we have our users. So the users of the product absolutely need to be the main focus throughout this design process. They are the people that are using the product to accomplish their goals, and it is not their managers, it's not their support teams, it's not the customers, they're using it. So at the end of the day, they need to be happy. And it's really important to understand how this is going to fit into their work or life, what they need to know to accomplish their goals, what their current day-to-day tasks and activities look like, their mental models, which we talked about in our second module. Oh, yes. So mental models, what do they already have in mind about how something's going to work? And understanding that will help you create a more intuitive product. And of course, frustration. So if you are aware of frustrations that they're having with their current solution, you're gonna want to go out of your way to make sure that you're not adding to that. You don't want to have a product that you're trying to get a user to be excited about that does not solve a problem or help them with a current frustration that they may have. So I'm going to take a second and just pause. Any questions so far about this process?
All good for me so far.
Great. And I know that this is a lot of information, and I promise in a couple of weeks, we will get into some more hands-on activities and it will be a little bit more fun. So just bear with me. Thank you for your attention.
I have a
Once we get
question.
through this. Yeah, go ahead.
So, like with designing websites in general, I've always usually thought about it like I've always been the designer, not the user. So
Mhm.
I've always had that fear of like, am I going to make something for me or am I making something that someone can use? So how does that, like, how do you reconcile for that?
So, and that's a great question and something that I can answer for sure. So day to day, I am in charge of maintaining my company's website and making improvements and whatnot. It is hard when you're working with your design team and whatnot, that to make sure that you're not just designing for internally. Like, so our design team likes this and maybe some product managers like it, but are our consumers, our core user base, do they like this? So a great way to make sure that you're not designing for yourself and you're actually designing for your user base is A/B testing. That is amazing. So if you have the ability to access a software like that, that will let you make different or shoot out different iterations of your pages to your traffic, and you can see in real time, okay, this red button is getting a lot more clicks than this button that blends into the background. All right, let me make that tweak and make sure that I am making this change so that it's adjusted for usability. Another great way to do that, if you are looking at Google Analytics, you can pretty quickly see if you have a super high bounce rate, that's not good. You want to look into that and see, that'll let you know, okay, I have some changes that I need to make. Another way is just doing some of this user testing. So it may be difficult if you're just a small, if you don't have access to all of this and you don't have access to a ton of people, but if you know some of your users, try to get their opinion. Are they having a hard time? Are they able to find the information that they need? If you are running a company and you notice that you're getting a ton of emails and phone calls about information that's very clearly on your website, guess what? It's not very clearly on your website. So you're gonna need to reassess how you have that laid out. So there's so many kind of stopgaps along the way that can help you make sure that you're not designing for yourself. Because when you're looking at the same website over and over and over again, you become blind to it. So you don't necessarily know because you're just so used to looking at it. So I would say getting those opinions, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Now on to ethnographic interviews or ethnographic field studies. So the goal of this is to understand the behaviors and the rituals of people interacting with a product, ideally in their natural habitat or environment. So we're meeting them where they're at. So if they're going to be using the product in an office setting, you're going to probably conduct this interview in an office setting, and so on. So you really want to see how they're using something and observe them. And the basic methods of how you're going to conduct these ethnographic interviews. So like I mentioned, you want to interview where that interaction happens. You want to avoid a fixed set of questions. So treat these people as individuals, not a test subject, which if you're conducting a bunch of interviews for the purpose of conducting research, it's hard not to think of it that way, but it's so important to make sure that you're still treating them as individuals. And when you're doing this, it's really helpful to assume the role of the apprentice, not the expert. So have them teach you how they would work through something. So if you're, for example, if you're testing a phone and you're interviewing someone, you would want them to explain to you how to use everything. And that way you can see if it really is intuitive or not. You want to have a variety of questions. So open-ended questions for sure, but you can use those closed-ended questions to lead your discussion and keep it moving. You want to focus on the goals first and the task second. So that big picture. I mentioned the student example of, as a college student, maybe your goal is to graduate and have a great GPA. So that's your goal. But the task to get there would be doing your homework, taking different classes, studying, putting in effort. Those are your tasks. But you want to know what that big picture goal is, because if you ask someone what the tasks are, they are going to tell you what they currently do. And it's more important for you to know the goal so that you can figure out as a designer what's the best way to approach this so that you can accomplish your goal. So it might not be the same tasks that they're currently doing. You want to avoid making your user the designer. So it's really important to get their feedback, but you don't want them to design the product for you. They're going to get wrapped up in some wild ideas that are not feasible and not really helpful. So it's really important that they don't take on that role. And you want them to tell you stories. The more stories or in-depth idea of how they're going to interact with something, why they're interacting with it, the better it is for you. You don't want to ask leading questions. So you don't want to force them down a road where they are responding a certain way because that's how you're leading the conversation, because that's not helpful. Then you're just validating your own ideas rather than getting this useful goldmine of information from your actual users. And of course, ask for show and tell. If they're showing you their office where they're interacting, that could spark something else as the designer, and it would be really helpful. So just take everything in, make sure you're not leading it, and hopefully it will be as natural as possible, and you'll be able to see how they're actually interacting on a day-to-day basis so that you can make that product amazing. Questions before we get into the details of this? Nope. Okay. Well, if anything comes up, feel free to interrupt me, throw it in the chat, whatever you need. So when you're preparing for these ethnographic field studies, you first want to start off by identifying who your candidates are. So next week, we'll talk about personas in depth, but you're going to create that persona hypothesis, figure out the roles in business and consumer domains, behavior and demographic variables. And then you're going to figure out maybe any environmental considerations. Is it, I keep going back to this office concept, but is it an open office? Is someone in their home and they have children and the kids are loud? Like, you want to know where they're using it and if there are any sort of limitations that are going to come into play when using the product. So I'm just trying to think. So Microsoft Teams, that is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's similar to Zoom, and I use that every day at work, and it is great and it is helpful because within Teams, they have a setting where you can kind of muffle out your background noise. That's awesome because a lot of my coworkers have kids that are screaming and it's not great to always hear them in meetings. So that's helpful. That's a helpful consideration of the environment. Another, I guess, example could maybe be with Zoom and Teams that you can blur the background. So not everyone wants to show off their background and whatnot. So you have that ability to kind of blur that out or have a virtual background if you need to be. So those would be some environmental considerations that I would think of right off the bat. You want to make sure that you're putting together a plan. You don't want to go into this blind. So usually you'll have a team that's going to conduct these interviews. You want to make sure that you identify the team roles. So that you're going to want, once you identify who you're going to be interviewing, you're going to have a minimum of probably 4 to 6 interviews per variable. So different roles. So you're maybe going to have 4 to 6 managers, 4 to 6, I don't know, higher up people, 4 to 6 entry level. Like if your product is for an office, you want to really capture all of those different variables and find out how all these different people are going to be interacting. And then lifestyle choices and life stages. So if someone is single versus married, or they have young children or older children, or they're empty nesters, that's going to multiply the number of interviews that you need, because each of these life stages and lifestyle choices, that's also going to have an impact on how people are interacting with the product. Okay, teams and timing. So you'll usually have a moderator, and that will be the person that drives the interview and takes light notes. So they're going to maybe take some observations down. They're not going to be in charge of the heavy lifting with notes. And then you'll have a facilitator. So that will be the person that's taking in-depth notes. They are looking for holes in any of the questioning. They are making sure that there aren't any questions that were missed, or if maybe they picked up on something that the moderator did not, they're going to move that along and continue moving the interview along. As far as timing for these interviews, it's really going to vary. So I mentioned some complex fields earlier. So if you're talking about the medical field or law, it's probably going to take a longer time because you're going to have to ask more questions to fully understand what's going on.
By feeding him this popsicle.
What kind of popsicle?
It's
You're making him become like you. Round.
Oh, I want a popsicle. Okay. Anyway, back to this. So that's usually going to be about an hour. That's fine. It doesn't have to be super long, but it could be, depending on that domain. Let's see. And there will be different phases of these interviews. So you will have multiple rounds of this. So this is not a one day and you're done situation. This is going to be a long process, and you're going to do it throughout the entire design process. So you'll have your early interviews. Those are going to be really broad. You're just trying to get an idea of the user's point of view. These are going to be really broad questions. They're going to be open-ended questions. Then as you get your initial information and you start forming your design more, you'll have your middle interviews. So your designers are going to start to see the patterns and connect the dots. So they'll go back and interview again so that they're able to ask any clarifying questions that they still have unanswered from the first round. And then finally, your late interviews, these are really used to confirm your patterns that you have previously observed. So more close-ended, and it's really just to tie up loose ends and make sure that everything is actually the way it should be. And now we're going to talk about what types of questions you would use during these interviews. Before I do that, any questions so far?
So in your research, are people very responsive, like in terms of the when you like put out surveys or something? Because like, what do you do when people aren't like your target audience for the website or something? They're not responsive.
Yeah, so I suppose it depends on the type of study that you're doing. So one way that you can do these studies is there are these kind of big research groups that will kind of help you figure out your users, and people will sign up for them. So there's one in New Jersey, it's, I believe, based in Berkeley Heights, where you or anyone else could sign up to be part of these groups. So in that sense, they're going to be responsive because they're getting paid to have input. So they know what they're going into, but that isn't to sway their decision. They're simply being paid to be participants, but that's not going to sway them either way towards a good or bad reading. So you typically will get a pretty good response. If they're not responsive, if you are like just manually sending out surveys, you probably want to broaden your group. So if you can send it out to 100 people versus 50, that's great. And if you only get 50 responses, that's okay. You should never expect to get a perfect response rating. You could also do different things within your website. So maybe you have a pop-up and that asks them a simple question. Or maybe you're having just thinking of different ways to kind of create funnels. So if you have different areas of interest on your website, you have different locations where maybe they can sign up for a newsletter. And then once you have that newsletter, once they're signed up for that, you can ask them or find out more behavior information that way. So you know that they signed up in a particular section. So let's say on Applegate, if they signed up in a recipe area, I know that they're interested in recipes. So I'm going to send them emails that are recipe related. And then I can see what they're clicking on and what their behavior is. Do they want recipes or do they want coupons, or like how are they interacting? So you can get a lot of information that way. But really, I would just say, like, keep whatever you're doing very simple. And as long as it's not creating a burden for someone to fill it out, that you'll probably get better, or not better, because any information is good, but you'll get more willing participants in your research. As far as this ethnographic interview, this is typically, you're not going to just roll up and blindside someone. They're going to know that they're participating in some sort of research. So it's a little bit easier that way than if you're just doing it on your own.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So I mentioned the types of questions that you're going to want to ask. So you want to ask goal-oriented questions. That's one way to get them talking. So what makes their day good? And it doesn't have to be related to the product. This could spark some inspiration that you didn't know you needed. What activities currently waste your time? So again, if you're thinking about a product for an office, what is redundant? What can your product maybe solve for them that is currently super annoying? what's most important, and information. What helps you make decisions? Are you consulting your best friend for advice before you're purchasing something? Are you going on the internet? Are you making some spontaneous decisions? You want to know what their process is there. And I mentioned earlier that when you're conducting these, you're going to have 4 to 6 interviews per role, per demographic variable. So you're going to have a huge group of people that you're interviewing. So it's not necessarily taking one person's word over another. At the end, you'll be able to see these patterns that start to form. Let's see. System-oriented questions. So what are the most common things you do with a product? So iPhone, how are you using this? What do you need to get out of this? Frequency. So what parts are you using most? If we're going back to a phone, are you using the camera? Are you texting? Are you looking at email all the time? What are you using? What functionality do you need? Preferences. What are your favorite aspects of this product? Failures? What sucks? And how do you work around that so it's not giving you a miserable day? And then you want to know a little bit about their expertise. So do they have any shortcuts? What are they up to? What are they doing? You want to know how they're doing that so you can get an idea of what works and what does not. The workflow. So what does their process look like? What did they first do when they came into work today? Did they turn their computer on and then wander off to the office kitchen and chat with their coworker for 10 minutes to warm up for the day and then mosey on back to their desk and get started? What does that look like? Do they like to come right in and dive into their email? You want to really know about what this person does and how they operate to help you understand how you can make that better for them. Occurrence and recurrence. So how often are you doing particular tasks? What are things that you do weekly and monthly, but not every single day? Because while it's not an everyday situation, you still want to account for these tasks in your product. And then what does a typical day look like? What is an unusual day for you? And this just helps paint that broader picture. Finally, we have our attitude-oriented questions. So aspiration, you want to know, what do they want to do in 5 years from now? Where do they see themselves? What do they hate? What are they trying to avoid? What causes them to procrastinate? And motivation. So what do they like most about their job or their lifestyle? What are they always really excited to tackle first? So for me, I love anything that's creative. That's so fun for me. What I always avoid like manual entry tasks that just seem like administrative work. It drives me nuts. I know that I have to do it, but I always put it off to the very last minute. So that's a lot. Questions on these types of questions and how you would use this, or how you would use these questions if you were conducting this sort of interview. And also, I see that we're up to 35 participants. No one hung up. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your attention so far. Okay. So some additional examples of qualitative research. We'll go through this quickly. You have your focus groups, and that's something that I mentioned earlier. So that's usually like you have people signing up, your non-COVID times, gathering them up in a room, and it's kind of what you think of during, if you see those like psychological studies where they have them in a room with a mirror and someone's on the other side looking in. So all of these target users are gathered in a room and they are asked a structured set of questions with a structured set of answers, and they're recorded. So this is great for getting your market research and getting your segment. It's not so great because when you're in a group and you're asking questions like this, you sometimes get that group think where you'll get one really outspoken person and you'll have some more meek people, and the outspoken person, it just becomes the voice of the room. And then eventually they all just kind of start thinking alike and answering similar. So you don't get that really like in-depth information that you would get out of maybe an ethnographic field study or a one-on-one interview with your users, just because you are in that group setting and it's just bound to happen. So it's great for certain things, but it's a great starting point when you want to see, all right, is this even going to be something that is going to be accepted into the marketplace? But when you're trying to get some more detailed information, not so great, especially because you are really getting those structured answers that you're not going to get a lot of color from that. Then we have usability testing, which is something that we will conduct in class this semester. So I love this. This is a great way to kind of validate your design and make sure that your design is doing what it should be. So this is usually done at the end of a design process. So this isn't really a starting point. This would be, you have a prototype and you want to test it out on a small group before you go live. And this will focus on how well users can complete specific tasks. And you'll be able to see any problems that they encounter along the way. It's a little bit of a standard procedure. So you'll usually have specific things that you're looking for, but a little bit more open-ended because everyone interacts with something differently because they have their own mental models. So if we're going to test an app, you may say, okay, how do you get to the, let's say, how do you sign up for this? So you would have that question posed, and then they would be given the app and they would go through it and try to figure out how to sign up. So you would ask specific task related questions and then watch how they interact with it. Card sorting. So this is a technique that was made popular by information architects. It's really helpful to understand how people are organizing information and concepts. So you get sort of an insight into what their mental model looks like. And this is performed by asking users to sort decks of cards, and each card would contain a piece of information or functionality related to a product or website. So maybe you would have a card that had a home screen, and then you had a card that went to a shopping cart and your product pages, and you would kind of ask them to sort how they actually get from point A to finally actually getting to your shopping cart and completing that transaction. So they would sort these cards in order, and then you'd be able to see that. And people sort these differently. It may seem that there's only one right way, but there isn't. There are infinite numbers of ways that people get around to doing things. And I think that's really important to take into consideration. And task analysis. So this would be your questionnaires, your open-ended interviews, and you're able to find out about how people perform specific tasks, which again, you would be surprised to see how many different ways people will do this. And my final takeaway, design research is important because if you do not do your research, you're going to end up designing a product for yourself. And while you may be amazing and have a great idea, that's not necessarily what your goal is. So you might not want to be designing a product for yourself if you're looking to design for a different consumer group. So putting in the work, it is tedious, it is time consuming, it is so worth it. It is rewarding because you will be able to take all of this research that you've conducted and get so much out of it, and it will be really rewarding when your product is a huge success. So questions, comments, concerns? I'm losing my voice from talking so much, so I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say. As I mentioned earlier, I don't know if everyone heard, I'm having issues with Canvas, so once I'm able to get the module live, I will, and you will have 7 days for the assignment once it's posted. So don't worry, there's not going to be anything due next Tuesday. And if you have any issues once it is live, I am here. I am available to chat, so don't worry. I see there's a question about what the assignment will be. Yes, you may ask that. So I have that set up. It is going to be another design journal, and you're going to be evaluating a website based on what we learned today. I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head, so I'm very sorry I can't give you more information now, but once it is live, I promise that it's not going to be anything tricky, and if you have any issues, we can talk about it. Rubrics for the design journals. Yes, I can work on putting that together. These are very open-ended, so I know that it's maybe not what everyone's used to, but I can definitely do that because it seems to be a request. So absolutely, I can do that to make it easier for everyone. I would say a very informal rubric. I'm just interested in what you're thinking. So with what is design, I want to know what your thoughts are. There's no right or wrong. So as long as you're putting some effort in, you're probably going to get a good grade. But I will make that a little bit more formal to make it easier. What else? A question that I have for all of you, when I am recording these lectures, would you prefer if I broke them up into 10-minute videos versus maybe like, I guess I talked for close to an hour today. Like, would you prefer 10-minute intervals or these videos broken into sections when we have our normal structure of I'm posting them prior to our class? Would that be easier or more annoying?
I think it works. Like for me, I'm fine watching like a longer one because I put it at like 2 times speed or like 1.5 speed. Because like I can like it's just easier that way rather than having to click through a bunch of videos.
Awesome. Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know. Thank you. I see that we have a lot of responses to one video, so thank you very much. I will keep it up and just have one video, so no problem there. Does anyone need anything from me? Is there anything that I can do to help you? I know we're still very early into the semester, so there may not be anything, but if there is, let me know. I mentioned on our first class, like the iterative methods that we're going to be learning about this semester, I truly believe that this class is iterative. So just because I did something last semester and it went over well, that doesn't mean that it's going to this semester. So we're going to adjust along the way and make sure that you're all getting the most out of this. And if you don't have any questions, comments, or concerns, you are free to go. Thank you very much for your time and attention tonight. And I will put an announcement out once I'm able to get everything posted. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.